And to talk more on the Venezuela crisis, joining me is DD India correspondent Akshay Dongre from New Delhi. Also joining us this morning is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, former senior diplomat. Good morning and welcome. Ambassador Sajjanhar, let me come to you first, sir. What is your reading of the dramatic US military action in Venezuela? The response of the international community so far has been oscillating between outrage, applause and silence.
Yes, thank you very much, Shubhendu. My first comment, of course, on this very unprecedented action that has been taken by the United States, by its forces. It is very bold. It's a very audacious move. The pressure on Venezuela had been increasing for quite some time, for the last several months, ever since President Trump came to office. But that it will turn out this way, I don't think anyone, not even in Venezuela, would have anticipated that there would be a swoop and the president and his wife, they would be abducted from there, they would be kidnapped and brought to the United States. Everyone had really been talking about whether there would be any ground operations, whether there would be any boots on the ground, and what are the risks that would entail. But the manner in which this operation has been, the precise way, the surgical manner in which this operation has been accomplished, I think that has definitely come as a huge surprise to everyone who has been watching the developments in Venezuela. Now, as far as the international response is concerned, I think by and large, Shubhendu, it is on predictable lines. Russia and China and Iran and Cuba, they were expected, Colombia, Brazil, they were expected to come out very strongly against this action, saying that, this is a violation of the UN Charter, violation of principles, UN principles, violation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the country. It sets a very dangerous precedent for other countries that those which are mighty, those which are powerful, they can go in with impunity into weaker countries and something similar what the West, what the United States and Europe has been saying about Russia in terms of its aggression against Ukraine. This is exactly similar to what has been done here. As far as Europe is concerned, of course, they are still trying to find balance, trying to walk a very thin dividing line between support for the United States and also expressing concern.
Right. Akshay, let me come to you for a quick update. The Venezuela situation has been evolving very rapidly. We just showed visuals of the deposed leader, Nicolas Maduro, being carried in a helicopter to the detention center in New York. If you could just take us through what happens next to him and what is happening in Venezuela meanwhile.
Well, the vice president has been sworn in as the president, and obviously there is going to be a pushback as far as this action is concerned. If you look at the legality of this entire incident, it's absolutely clearly a violation of the UN Charter, as we can say. The way US has carried on this operation has sort of set a very dangerous precedent. Now what happens in Ukraine, what happens in Taiwan, what happens elsewhere around the world will be given an example of the same kind of an action, and the silence that Europe has maintained is going to be a big task for them to defend in the upcoming months or probably years when similar kind of actions are taken by other major powers that are there, especially Russia in relation to Ukraine. So that perhaps also the reason why the European countries are trying to somewhat find a balance, or rather express concern, but now Russia can always come and say that hey, US did this, and there was a pin drop silence about that, so why can't we take a similar kind of action if we can do it? The action that has been taken by the US clearly says that might is right. If we had the power to go in, pick a president up, bring him to our country, and now we will try him according to our laws. Plus, the kind of reactions that are coming in from the US president, where he's overtly, talking about US and US companies tapping into Venezuela's oil reserves, the sort of oil reserve that it has, clearly, goes on to show that some countries, perhaps, like North Korea, would be quite happy that they had a stockpile of nuclear weapons, and that perhaps is the reason why nobody could depose their leader. So it is in terms of nuclear proliferation as well. This is going to be quite dangerous for the rest of the world.
Akshay, stay with us. Ambassador Sajjanhar, everyone was waiting to hear what Donald Trump had to say in the last evening India time address, and the line that stood out, that when he says that US will run Venezuela, and he elaborates in saying that United States would have large American oil companies go into Venezuela. The narrative, sir, has shifted very quickly from narcotics to oil.
No, absolutely. I think that is what many of the international commentators and analysts had been saying, that it was less to do with democracy, less to do with narco-terrorism, less to do with Maduro, and basically eyes were on the energy assets, on the fossil fuel reserves of Venezuela. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, but in terms of the exploitation, it is very minimal. It contributes only about 0.8% to the global energy production, oil production. So the United States has its eyes on that, and of course there are no holds barred on the United States going in for exploitation of fossil fuels. Earlier it was, that we are going to phase out in calibrated manner the oil and other fossil fuels, coal, etc., and go into renewables. But that has been completely dumped by Mr. Trump. So he is going to go all out as far as the exploitation of oil resources are concerned. So this is, everyone will be pointing fingers that it is for profit, that Mr. Trump has gone there, and this was just a facade. This was just a whitewash that it was mentioned. And even Mr. Maduro had always mentioned that this has nothing to do with narco-terrorism, because there are other countries which are much bigger perpetrators of narco-terrorism, where drug cartels are there, whether it is Colombia and some of the other South American countries. But he's coming after Venezuela basically because of petroleum and the fact that Venezuela has threatened for quite some time that they are going to move away from trading in oil in dollars and go into national currencies and RMB, yuan, etc., because China is a big importer. So this was seen as a threat to the dollar, which has reigned supreme for the last, more than 50, 60 years. So I think there are very many economic considerations that have been at the back of all this, and the manner, the impunity with which all of this is being done. I think this has sent shockwaves, particularly as far as smaller countries are concerned, developing countries are concerned, and those in Latin America. Countries like Cuba, of course, countries far away like Iran, also there have been threats, but particularly countries like Cuba and others in the vicinity, because under the national security strategy that was issued by the United States on the 4th of December, it has been very categorically mentioned that the Monroe Doctrine will prevail, will apply with the Trump corollary, which means that no outside strong powers like Russia and China will be allowed to come and have any sort of predominant influence in any of the countries.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanhar, I request you to stay with us while we look at some more news and updates coming in on this story. Lawmakers in the United States on both sides of the aisle reacted to the strikes on Venezuela and the capturing of its leader, Nicolás Maduro. Democratic members of the US Congress said on Saturday that senior officials of President Trump's administration had misled them during recent briefings about plans for Venezuela by insisting that they were not planning regime change in Caracas. While Republican members of the United States House expressed strong support for US President Donald Trump's actions. Meanwhile, India has urged its nationals to avoid all non-essential travel to Venezuela after US troops captured the South American country's President Nicolás Maduro and took them to the United States following a military assault on Caracas. As per the advisory, all Indians currently in Venezuela were advised to exercise extreme caution, restrict their movements and remain in contact with the Indian embassy in Caracas through the email ID and the emergency phone number that you can read on the screen, also on the MEA website and Twitter as shown on your screens. The world reacted to US strikes on Venezuela capturing Maduro on Saturday. French President Emmanuel Macron praised the US removal of Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro and said that transition must be peaceful, democratic and respectful of the will of its people. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz called for legal assessment of the US strikes, calling it complex. And United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has voiced his concern over the escalation between United States and Venezuela, culminating in the capture of the country's President Nicolás Maduro, saying the developments constitute a dangerous precedent. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu praised Trump for capturing Venezuela's President Maduro, saluting his decisive resolve and the brilliant action of brave soldiers. While China criticized the interference of US in Venezuela crisis, according to Chinese Foreign Ministry statement, China is deeply shocked and strongly condemns the use of force by the United States against a sovereign country and the use of force against president of a country. Russia also condemned US strikes against Venezuela and called for peace and resolution through dialogue. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has refused to be drawn on whether or not US President Trump's military action against Venezuela may have broken international law.
I want to establish the facts first. I want to speak to President Trump. I want to speak to allies. As I say, I can be absolutely clear that we were not involved in that. And as you know, I always say and believe we should all uphold international law.
And a conversation on the Venezuela crisis continues. DD India correspondent Akshay Dongre and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar continue to be with us. Akshay, Nicolás Maduro is set to face trial in a New York court. If you can share some details as to how this trial will unfold, and will the deposed leader also have some legal recourse in the procedure?
Well, from what it seems, obviously, it is going to be a sort of a farce, if it comes to the kind of action that has been taken, allegations that have been leveled. So, we are way past the, domestic legality of it. Now, the question is the international legality of the action that has been taken by the US. Obviously, there will be a show trial. They will try Maduro. They may also give some sort of some sort of legal representation to Maduro as well. However, it seems highly unlikely that Maduro is going to take it, because it is it is going to be a farce when it comes to the allegations are concerned, because they have already been set. The allegations are directly coming in from the United States president, where he has been calling Maduro a narco-terrorist, his group narco-terrorist, talking about the cartels that are flooding in the US with drugs. We have seen the recent action that were taken by the US military were also illegal when they shot and killed remaining survivors of alleged drug trafficking boat that they had struck. And while some people were already killed, the survivors had surrendered, but they still went ahead with killing the remaining survivors from that boat, which had become quite a controversy. And then Pete Hegseth had to, justify the action that was taken. Donald Trump had to talk about it, tweet about it rather. It's also, the allegations are already set. The mind is already made up. And if we go or rather think any other way, it's just disillusion that there is going to be any sort of justice in that court when Maduro is presented there. So, the action has been initiated by illegal action by the US forces. They went into a sovereign country, pick up a leader. It's not even be it a leader, be it a civilian. You go inside a country, take a sovereign of that country, bring that person to your country and try to now trial him. What if the Chinese military would have done same with Donald Trump on any kind of allegation that they would have leveled, or let's say Putin would have abducted Zelensky and then tried to try them in their court. So when it comes to this sort of hypocrisy that has been going on when it comes to the action that is usually taken by the Western countries, it's startling, and it has always been done, especially when it comes to the African nations or the global South countries, because when the action is taken by the West, it is always mighty and right. But when the same thing applies to them, then all sort of laws and international rules and rule-based order comes into picture.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanhar, if you could share some insights on the complexities involved when national and international laws collide. I mean, how do you try a sovereign of a leader of another country in a foreign land? I mean, it's not the first time that it's happening in the United States, but what are the complexities involved now that the world would be looking at the trial of Nicolás Maduro in a New York court?
Yeah, Shubhendu, I think that's a very important question. And as you said, it is not the first time it's happening. We had seen that, when the Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega and, from Grenada, from Nicaragua and others, they were apprehended and they were brought here. Again, some of them on similar drug-related charges. And this works according to the law of the United States. So here, the accuser is the United States, the judge and jury is United States, law is United States. So the decision, the verdict is quite well known. But as far as the international law is concerned, this is literally tearing the international law into smithereens and throwing it into the wind. But, as we've been discussing, it is again not the first time. This has always happened. There has been so many regimes that have been overturned, and particularly, what is mentioned, what has been stated, that the strong and the mighty will do what they can, and the weak and the impoverished suffer what they must. So this has been happening for a long time. And in this case also, there are, of course, going to be statements against this action by the United States. There will be meetings in the UN Security Council. Again, since United States is a veto-wielding member, there is going to be no decision that will be adopted, because that decision will be vetoed by the United States. In the General Assembly, discussions will take place, and there would be a significant majority, particularly of the global South countries, which will be critical of what the United States has done. But still, there is going to be no action on that, because those decisions, those resolutions are not binding, those which are taken in the UN General Assembly. So it is the talks, discussions, deliberations will go on for a long time. But in terms of yielding any result that will place some sort of, impose some sort of a restraint on the United States, that is very unlikely. As far as the domestic laws are concerned, of course, there'll be some criticism by the Democrats. Republicans will fall completely behind Mr. Trump as far as Democrats are concerned. But, no one can really go out there and say that, we oppose this, because then that will be painted by the Republicans as saying that the Democrats are in favor of drug peddling and narco-terrorists and drugs coming into our country, and as far as our youth are concerned, spoiling their lives and their future. So it will be very difficult even for the Democrats to take a very strong stand against this move by Mr. Trump.
And Ambassador, finally, how do you read the political road ahead for Venezuela? Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has taken charge. It's not an out-and-out overthrow of the leftist regime as one had speculated earlier. We don't see a role for Maria Corina Machado, for instance, immediately. But what do you see are the possibilities that lie ahead?
Yeah, so, there are three conflicting points of action. Number one, what Mr. Trump has said yesterday, that the United States is going to take over, provide safety, security, peace, and judicious rule in that country. Now we'll really have to wait and see as to how if it is serious about imposing its will, because it does appear it is serious, because it has its eyes on the oil reserves of Venezuela. So that is one area of action. Now, Corina Machado, she had said yesterday that the contender against Mr. Maduro in the 2024 presidential election, Eduardo Felipe Gonzalez, who's currently in Spain, that he should take over the presidency. And even, in fact, the United States had also rooted for him during the elections last year in 2024. But at that time, of course, it was Mr. Biden who was heading the US administration and not Mr. Trump. And Mr. Trump has different ideas. So that also doesn't, at least in the near immediate future, that will not be working out. And as far as Venezuela itself is concerned, as you said very rightly, the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has taken charge. But how effective that control is going to be is again a moot point, because the reports that are emanating out of Caracas and from other cities, and Venezuela is a large country, we have to recognize that, there have been protests and demonstrations both by supporters of Mr. Maduro and also celebrations by those who are opposed to him. So whether peace and security will be established by the current dispensation, by the leftist dispensation there is that prevails in Venezuela at the moment, that is again a very debatable point. So I think this will stay contentious, in my view, Shubhendu, for some time, till some sort of a clarity comes to the situation as far as all these competing claims and pulls and pushes are concerned.
On that note, many thanks, Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, for joining us on the News Hour, sharing your perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. Thank you.